Steve Bannon, thanks for being with Euronews today. Let's start with the obvious question. Why are you here in Europe?
I'm here in Europe principally to learn. One of the things that I was able to bring to the Trump campaign when I came in as CEO is really, I think, a lot of practical experience of observing these kind of populist nationalist movements. And Trump did win as a populist nationalist. I think one of the things we did the latter parts of the campaign that really surprised Hillary Clinton, we ran really as populist nationalists. Quite different than a traditional Republican, and she never could quite get a grasp on that, and the Democratic Party couldn't. We really reached out and played to the worker base, the Reagan Democrats, and people who had not voted for quite a while, who were working class people. A lot of that I picked up in just observing what was going on in Europe. I mean, I made a real study years before when we launched Breitbart London. In fact, we launched Breitbart London to follow this populist nationalist movement that were occurring all over Europe, and particularly it was UKIP and Nigel Farage, which was a more professional version of the Tea Party. And so here, this revolution, this kind of right-wing populist nationalist movement is different in each country. If in China they say China's socialism with Chinese characteristics, populism and nationalism is different in each country. You have in the Czech Republic with Czech characteristics, in Hungary, where we are today, with Hungarian characteristics, in Italy different, etc. So I'm here to kind of learn and observe, and every now and again, if I can give some advice or throw some of my 2 cents in, I do that.
Let's bounce back on this term that you use several times, the populist nationalist, and you used it yesterday in your speech as well. Yeah. What exactly, very briefly, what do you mean by populist nationalist?
Populism is trying to get decision-making back to the people and back down to the subsidiarity is a concept that kind of came out of Catholic social thinking, but subsidiarity, to try to get decision-making back down to closer to the people as possible. Right now, what you have in Europe and the United States, you have kind of this globalist elite, what I refer to as the party of Davos, this kind of scientific, engineering, managerial, financial elite that make all the decisions, whether it's in the city of London, Wall Street, Brussels, London, Washington, D.C. It's kind of this elitist attitude, this kind of central government mentality that they can make all these decisions, and they're much smarter than common people or people that are working class people. I happen to radically oppose that idea. I had the great fortune as a young man, after I left naval service as a naval officer, to go to Harvard Business School and to work at Goldman Sachs and to kind of be in the conference rooms or the boardrooms where the McKinsey consultants or the Bain consultants and all the M&A guys, all the smartest guys in the room from the hedge funds were all there. And I realized they had a lot less common sense and a lot less understanding of humanity than my own family did. My dad, went to high school. My grandfather was a third grade. These are, blue-collar working class people, that the working class has a much better feel for the reality of the world than the elite. So populism's that. Nationalism is a part of that, in which you look at the nation state as kind of, as Marine Le Pen calls, kind of a jewel to be cherished and polished, versus something to be overcome. I mean, the European project, what the EU has really become over the last 20, 25 years, is looking at kind of a United States of Europe, where countries like the Czech Republic or Hungary or Italy are just like states in the United States, like Nebraska or Colorado or North Carolina, instead of their own individual entities. And so I think this in the United States, what had happened, we had become too much run by globalists, too much. And that's what Hillary Clinton kind of represented. There was this fraternity of man globally, in that the workers' interests and citizens' interests were not put at first. And so the Trump campaign completely flipped it on its head.
Let's stop a second, because we're going in all directions here. I want to come back to when you accuse the global elite, and you said that several times yesterday as well. Who is or what is the global elite? And don't you see a contradiction between what you accuse them of and the fact that you're probably part of the global elite as well? Like you said, you're former Goldman Sachs.
Just because, but just because you're smart enough to get into or fight your way into that doesn't mean that you back the virtues of it. I was able to see kind of the global elite is a collection of the corporatist international corporations, the big Wall Street banks, the hedge funds, right? It's that party of Davos crowds.
Part of that.
Well, I was there, right? And now for the last 10 or 15 years, after I ended my banking career, I've been very much, meeting Andrew Breitbart and the Tea Party movement. I've been one of the driving forces in back of building the populist movement in the United States. It's one of the reasons that the Trump campaign they reached out to me with some people who were sponsors, when it was in dire straits in August, that, hey, this guy really understands the populist movement. He's done this. He understands the nationalist movement. So yeah, I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to, go to Harvard, go to Goldman Sachs. I had my own bank. I sold it to actually the French bank, Société Générale. I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to, work at that level and understand it. I think it takes people who have actually been in the system that can deconstruct it, that actually can help the working class people and middle class people form an apparatus to help them take charge of their lives and take their countries back. So I'm very, very proud of that.
Mm-hmm. Yesterday at your speech, there was no filming or recording allowed. Was that done on purpose? Was there a reason behind that?
I don't think that was true. It was 100 media people there.
There were media, but we weren't allowed to film.
That's what the organizers. I hope.
You had nothing to do with that.
No. In fact, okay. I hope the I just had a on BBC. They did a complete 1 hour one-on-one after the. This is in the Czech Republic the other day. One-on-one. I thought if we can't, we'll get the. I'd love to get the version out. I thought I did a good job in the speech and trying to explain it. But this is whatever the organizers were. Mm-hmm. I wanted to make sure there was media there, and I think somebody told me there's 100 media present, which we've been doing interviews, since last night. Today, I'm somebody that, look, I ran a media company. I like to have the fact of getting the word out from media.
Were you afraid that maybe some of the controversial remarks you made in the past, for example, when you spoke at the National Front conference in France, and you said that when people call you racist, you should wear it as a badge of honor? That was a very controversial remark.
Okay, stop, because you're about to get blown up here. I want to make sure this is in your interview. Tell me what their quote was. This is why the media has so little credibility. Mm-hmm. You No. I want you to explain it to me. Why did you just take the last part of the quote? I did this on BBC the other night. Hang on. No. Walk me through what that quote was. Walk me through the build-up to that quote.
Let them call you racist. Let them call you xenophobes. Wear it as a badge of honor.
Go beforehand. See, this is why. No. It's not the quote. That's not the quote. That's not the quote. That's not the quote. And you on purposely are misleading people.
It's just a question.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. You are trying to. You just be honest about what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Be honest about what you're trying. Here's the quote. Here's the quote. Go back to the Front National, and I would like Euronews, because this is an NBC trick, right? You guys are the propaganda department for the global. You're the propaganda department. And by the way, I wanted things shown. I'm glad to tell you. I'll tell you right here to your face. You're the propaganda department for the global elite.
Okay.
That's what NBC is.
All right.
And here's how you're going to get blown up. The quote in the Front National talk was very specific. I said they call Donald Trump a racist, right? They call him a nativist. They call him all this. I said, look at what his economic policies are doing for black and Hispanic people. We have the lowest, because of Donald Trump's policies, we have the lowest black unemployment in the history of our country. We have the lowest Hispanic unemployment in the last 20, 25 years. I said economic nationalism does not care about your race, does not care about your gender, does not care about your ethnicity, does not care about your religion, doesn't care about your sexual preference. Okay? Only thing it cares about is you're a citizen. And I said they won't debate you on the facts. They'll call you a racist and a nativist and a xenophobe. And when they call you that, word is a badge of honor. And here's why. Because you can't debate the facts. So, but here's what the media does. Would CNN put it up right away? Oh, call racism a badge of honor. The BBC did it the other night, and I blew her up. One of the guys in the Czech Republic did it, I blew her up. You just did it, and I blew her up. This is not lazy. We know you guys are lazy. And it's not competence. You do it on purpose. This is how you try to. No, you're not. No, you're not. No. Then why didn't you do? Then why didn't you give? Why didn't you give the whole quote? Why didn't you give the whole quote?
We only have a half an hour interview. I just want to get to straight questions.
It's not a straight question.
We're giving you an opportunity here to respond.
It's not a straight question.
Yesterday you talked about that BBC interview.
Yeah.
You also referred to Dr. King, that he would be proud
very much
of Mr. Donald Trump.
Yes.
Would you care to comment on that quote?
I said, Martin Luther King was an economic nationalist. He was very much focused, particularly to the latter part of his life. Remember, he was in Memphis when he was assassinated at a garbage collectors strike.
Very left wing.
Strike.
view on economics.
Well, by the way, you call it left wing. I call it economic nationalism. I think a lot of the stuff that we deal with Bernie Sanders.
It's not terms. I mean, there are different things. But
no, but he was there to support workers, okay, to get a better deal.
Exactly.
He's an economic nationalist. But when I said the BBC, I said Martin Luther King. I said the policies of Donald Trump, particularly to stop mass illegal immigration, because mass illegal immigration goes on in the United States for one reason: to suppress the wages of the black and Hispanic working class. Because the capitalists and the Chamber of Commerce and all those guys want unlimited labor, okay, so they can do it as cheap as possible. And it's unfair. And it's what's hurt the black and Hispanic working class. That's been Donald Trump from day one. We stopped mass illegal immigration. And here's what you're seeing. Not only is unemployment at all-time lows and at 20-year lows for Hispanics, wages are starting to rise. Wages are particularly rising in agriculture, construction, oil field services, where black and Hispanic workers exist, and in the service industry. And that is specifically because of the policies of Donald Trump. And yes, I think Martin Luther King would be very proud of the fact that black Americans, working class Americans particularly, are now getting a shot.
And I heard your speech yesterday, and a lot of the things you said about blue-collar workers and defending blue-collar workers and the working class of America, some of these policies that Donald Trump seems to go against and hurting the working class when you look at the repeal of Obamacare or the tax cut that mainly benefit the rich. Isn't that going
What do you mean?
against
What do you mean mainly benefit the rich? This is another thing. Tell me what you mean by that.
the tax cut that he recently got voted in Congress?
Why do you say it was for the rich? What analysis do you say that
Because
does
it's
that?
the top-
Is that just more of the?
it's
It's
the
just
top
more.
5% who
That's just more.
benefit-
That's just more
It's
of
the
the.
top 5% who benefit from these tax cuts.
Okay.
You know it.
The core of the tax cut, the central part of the tax cut, was a corporate tax cut to take corporate marginal tax rates from 35% to 20%. I think it's 75% of the.
Who does that benefit?
Well, hang on. The reason we did it, it benefits workers, and here's why. Our tax code had gotten incredibly non-competitive with Germany, particularly in China. In order to get capital investment and start to build plant and factories, remember the central part of Trump's program is to bring high value added manufacturing jobs back from East Asia, back from China, also from Mexico. It's the reason we're in all these tariff fights and in all these renegotiations. You see now with Germany, we're now in this thing with EU. The central beating heart of that is to bring high value added manufacturing jobs back. We had to, whether we liked it or not, because of what happened on our corporate rate, we had to make it strategically more competitive. So the basic heart of the tax cut was a corporate tax cut principally focused on repatriation of trillions of dollars of cash from overseas, and also to make our companies more competitive. That is to build a manufacturing base in the United States, and that is going to benefit workers.
But there are also risks with the trade wars that you just mentioned about those companies that benefit from exports in the U.S. But let's move on to...
By the way, I agree with that. And, Paul Ryan's border adjustable tax, the original tax bill that was going to be contemplated, is very much along the German model of export driven. Mm-hmm. That, for a whole host of reasons, it hadn't been nurtured enough. It hadn't been promoted enough. So that tax bill, the one we were originally going to go out with, kind of crumbled, and we came back with this other one. But everything, if you look at the line of attack of everything that Trump's been trying to do, everything revolves around trying to get manufacturing jobs back to the United States.
They won't come back, no matter what you do.
This is absolutely okay. This is the point of the talk. Yes. No. Hang on a second. Once again, this is the globalist mentality. The globalists sit there and think that, oh, because I own intellectual property or I own corporate control in one area, what I want to do is then ship out jobs all over the world to the lowest cost production place. This is the central thesis of globalism, okay? Mm-hmm. It's not correct. It's wrong. If everything's just purely about economics, if everything's just purely about the math, and I went to Harvard so I know how to add, okay, you might be technically correct, but it misses the point of what a society is. And I think it was what Trump is saying, is that a civic society is built upon, okay, a manufacturing base of workers with high value-added jobs. And that's why you guys treat it like it's some second law of thermodynamics, that this is just some immutable law of physics, that these jobs have to go there. And what you're seeing in the Trump revolution in the United States, that's not true. That's why he's now in these intense discussions, whether it's in China, whether it's NAFTA in Mexico and Canada, whether it's with the EU. You saw in the last 24 hours, we're talking about huge tariffs potentially on cars, that there is he's a disruptor. And one of the things he's trying to do is work through a system that capital investment comes back, and high value-added manufacturing jobs come back to the United States.
I mean, I really want to hear your points of view about Europe, and I'll move on to that just after. Just one more question. In your rhetoric, whenever you seem to debate, you're very aggressive with people who seem to disagree with you. Why are you so? Are you so certain that you have all the truths, and that everybody else is a liar and is out there to destroy you in your way of thinking?
No, well, I think that in promoting the cause of populism and nationalism, I have a certain house style. My house style is to always be on the attack. Okay, I've listened. By the way, I've listened to the arguments. I can hear it the other day in debate. The other day in debate in the Czech Republic. If you go back and look at Lanny Davis, first off, our whole thesis. Lanny is a Clintonite. You know, I'm from the Trump camp. Is that we can disagree reasonably, and I think it was a very nice debate for an hour and a half. Right. We went back and forth. If you saw it, we went back. I let him have his pitch.
And we could probably talk for hours about these things, but let's try to move on.
But this is not a debate. You're asking questions. It's different.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
an
asking
interview,
questions.
right?
I know.
Right.
I'm
and I am trying to school you. I don't have much time. I am trying to get you up the learning curve so I can understand. So
but I'm not here to learn. I'm just here to ask questions.
You should always be here to learn.
Right. You use these terms nationalist, populist, economic nationalism. In Europe, those terms may refer to a dark period. You know that Europe here went to 2 world wars. We had massive problems with these kind of policies and this far right rhetoric in the past. Do you think when you come here to Europe and you promote this kind of policies and you have this kind of rhetoric, are you playing with fire?
By the way, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you're the reporter. Did the last 2 elections in Europe, in Hungary and in Italy, 2/3 of the people in popular elections voted for anti-establishment populist nationalist party? Hang on. You talk about rhetoric. Hang on. Here's what the globalists like. No, the global. Here's what the question. To answer the question.
Are you playing with fire?
By the way, did not 2/3 of people in Italy and in Hungary, 2/3, voted for populist nationalist candidates? Okay, I didn't see any riots in these countries. I didn't see any things burned down. What I saw is an active discussion. See what the globalists want? They want to all of a sudden say, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, you're playing with fire." These terms are so.
Playing with fire?
Absolutely not.
No.
What I think it's doing is empowering.
It's not dangerous to promote nationalism in Europe.
Oh, absolutely not. What are you talking about? Nationalism is the reason Europe's greatness is because the nation state, the Treaty of Westphalia. Right, the nation state for 300 years built, the greatest society. By the way, it's the mother society of the United States,
right.
Which became a nation.
To 2 world wars, and then you had the European Union, and you had to.
Was that nationalism? Was that nationalism? I would say national. I say, was that nationalism, or was that elites, right? Elites that took it on their own power to drive countries where they were. I would say if you look at the populist nationalist movement, you're shaking your head. Here's a problem. Okay, let me explain it to you then. Okay, so take notes. Because what you just tried to do is smear the populist nationalist movement.
I'm trying to understand.
No, you're not trying to understand. Then how can you sit there and say, you guys love liberal democracy until you start losing elections? Once you start losing elections, because you're getting smoked throughout Europe, okay? Once you start losing elections, all of a sudden it's playing with fire, right? Show me where the fire was in Italy, right? Show me where the fire was here in Hungary.
What about France?
Right? Well, in France, by the way, the Front National lost.
Yes.
Right. By the way, they're not everybody.
So you see, they don't win everywhere.
I didn't say they win everywhere. And by the way, I've said from day one, in the populist nationalist movements, you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. You're going to have days you win and days you lose. And I also said yesterday, if you remember from our speech, just because you win one election, they're not going to sit there and toss you the keys and say, hey, what a brilliant idea. Look at Brexit and look at Trump. Mm-hmm. In Brexit, the British people voted to leave the EU. And look at the stumbling blocks that the City of London and Brussels have put up for England to leave. Okay, the establishment is not going to, the vested interest in the party of Davos, or that's not going to sit there and pat you on the head and say it's terrific, right?
So now, how do you plan on taking on the EU institutions in Brussels?
I don't plan on taking them on. I think I'm just here as an observer. I think, by the way, a perfect example is what's happening in Italy. You know, today they've actually announced the formation of the government and the sign-off of the new prime minister. And I think what you've seen there, and I think this is what's such a monumental historical day, you saw 2/3 of the people in the Italian elections vote for anti-establishment and anti-establishment parties and candidates. And what they were able to do was to put aside their differences in the traditional left-right spectrum. We just talked about Martin Luther King being leftist. They put aside, because the Five Star Movement is a center-left populist movement, and the League, or the Northern League, is a right-wing populist movement. They put those aside and said, let's join together and be a true populist nationalist government first, anti-establishment, anti-Brussels, because we want our sovereignty back, and we'll work at our economic differences over time.
Yeah, we'll see the results, I guess, in a few years' time. But don't you think?
Hopefully, you'll see it quicker than that.
That the program that they want to put in place already, with the fact that they have a debt that's more than 130% of the GDP, I think.
But can I say something?
Isn't that dangerous economically? The policies that they want to.
Hang on, okay. The dangerous policies. See, this is isn't it dangerous? Aren't you playing with fire? It's all the code words. The 130% of debt they have to their economy. Did the populist movement do that? Who did that?
The previous government.
And the previous the previous governments were put in by who?
By the Italians?
You'd be dead wrong. You've got to know more facts.
Or
ECB.
Are you talking about the technical governments?
The ECB put in three. Come on, ECB put in three governments. Not elected by the Italian people. Not elected by the Italian. But by the way, that's all the center left and the center right governments, right? These are not populist governments. This was part of the crony capitalism. That this was part of the establishment.
But the reason to run on the debt, isn't it dangerous to run your economy on so much debt?
First off, the centralized government. Remember, centralized government in Brussels or Washington D.C. A centralized government's in the business of debasing your citizenship. Okay, central banks are in the business of debasing your currency. In this kind of central technocratic, crony capitalist. Big government and big tech companies is in the business of debasing your digital personhood. The central banks, it's the guys in Brussels, in the ECB, that have gone along with what Italy's been doing with establishment, crony capitalist governments over 20 or 30 years. The populace and the people of Italy, and by the way, it's going to be quite tough. They got a very tough road to hoe. But the Italian people are saying, we understand this doesn't work, and it can't work. We've got to try something new. But in trying something new, what the propaganda department of the globalist, and that would be the Financial Times of London, The Economist, the BBC, and Euronews, okay, the propaganda department of the globalists sit there and go, oh my God, look at this. These are dangerous people, okay? You have 130%. They don't know what they're doing. There may be a period where you're going to go through some choppy water. I think everybody understands that, right? But at least now, you have people engaged in saying, we understand that the system that worked before, that was a combination of crony capitalism that got us in this situation, can't work in the future. And I'm not saying it's not going to all be sunny days. You know, you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, but at least now you have an engaged, look at the enthusiasm that you had in Italy leading up to that election. I was there and I was blown away. It felt like, whether it's Five Star or Northern League, it felt like Trump rallies all the time. I mean, the enthusiasm of the Italian people, and here's one thing that people, I don't understand to watch Euronews overall. These two parties ran with no money. I mean, the Five Star were really doing it on Facebook Live. Northern League did it on Facebook Live. The Five Star movement is essentially an internet party, just on the internet. They bootstrap this entire thing.
These are checks really who controls their platform, which voted more than 90% to agree on the government. It is controlled by insiders. So there are also problems with this kind of problems in terms of transparency. But I get your point. Let's move on to another country, the country we're in now, led by Mr. Viktor Orban, a man that yesterday during your speech you repeated several times that you admire him.
Yes, very much so.
What do you admire so much about Mr. Orban?
Well, I admire the fact that he took a very tough stand and really saved his country. I mean, the implosion of...
What do you mean he saved his country?
Well, it's very simple. In 2014 and 2015, because of what was happening in the Middle East, you had this tremendous issue of refugees or migrants just blowing up, just leaving the Middle East and heading north, okay, at the invitation of Angela Merkel. I mean, Angela Merkel allowed in 2 million Syrian refugees. But by the way, the paperwork has, no, that's not true, 2 million. The net result of people leaving was 1.2 million, but it was 2 million. 2 million Syrian refugees,
we'll check these numbers.
Well, you can check the numbers. Yeah. It's 1.2 net because they had people actually leave the country and go, but it's about 2 million.
Well, the net is anyway. Let's.
No. My point is about no chain of title. There's no chain of title. There's no. There's no.
Such a problem. Why is it a threat?
What do you think is a threat? Do you have any idea who these people are? Do you know? Do you have
Syrians fleeing war and
persecution? And do you know if they're ISIS? Do you know if they're radicalized? Do you have any chain? Do you have any idea of the chain? See, this is the kind of nebulous thinking that causes countries to get in trouble.
And
this is one Angela Merkel.
This is generalization of a whole population.
Well, first off, people should have, and people deserve the right, as Viktor Orban said, and as Donald Trump said in the United States, to have sovereignty, to have control of the borders, to have an immigration policy you can actually let people in. What was happening in Hungary is that they were just coming up through the Balkans, through Hungary. And what Viktor Orban said, hey, we're not going to do that. Also, what we're not going to do is be in the EU and have Germany do this. And then when Angela Merkel panics, because she understands she made a huge mistake, and then the EU tries to just farm out these refugees and migrants, we're not sitting there. We didn't sign up to say we're going to have to take X amount of them, just like in Italy. In Italy, you had the crisis in 2016 where migrants came up from North Africa, not from Syria. And what happened is that people closed their borders and said, Italians, you have to deal with them. This is just not fair to people on the ground. And by the way, that's why you had that's why you had these massive elections. People here, citizens of Hungary, voted overwhelmingly. They support those policies. They support a wall. They want sovereignty. They want to keep their country intact. I think that's something to be supported. In the United States, that's one of the central reasons we beat Hillary Clinton.
But Mr. Orban has also been cracking down on opposition, on free press, on NGOs. He also won.
NGOs? You mean George Soros? You mean George Soros? What he's cracking down is George Soros.
Mm-hmm.
George Soros.
Not just George Soros. George Soros is just one.
George Soros. It's George Soros' money back of everything. Look, George Soros is one of those evil people in the world. Okay, he's been in the United States for years, trying to wreak his havoc with the open society. Okay, trying to destroy the borders of the United States, trying to destroy the United States of America.
He's promoting civil society.
George Soros, okay, from day one in the United States, has been trying to destroy the United States of America.
That's
okay,
conspiracy theory.
It's absolutely not. By the way, his open border society, he's the biggest sponsor of open borders. We have fought George Soros from day one. So if Viktor Orban's taking on George Soros,
he didn't answer my question.
What?
Did here in Hungary, Mr. Orban did crack down on opposition, on free press. Is that the kind of government that you support?
Viktor Orban, I think, is a hero. He's a hero to the populist nationalist movement throughout the world. I think what Viktor Orban has done, from an observer's basis, from somebody in the U.S. basis, is been nothing short of heroic. I think he's a true hero. And by the way, I think President Trump, very much goes along the lines of what Viktor Orban's doing, particularly in trying to build a southern border. I mean, at least Viktor Orban got his wall built. President Trump has been trying to force through building a wall in the United States. Eventually, we'll get it.
And that didn't answer my question of why you think that migrants coming in or refugees are such a problem. Why is it
because
such a problem
because it's how do you assimilate that? And people in the country have voted. They said they don't want that. They don't want this unassimilated population coming in, right? Just because you're in Syria, you have no right just to kind of come up and come to another country.
If you're being bombed, you don't have the right to seek refuge?
You don't have you do not have a right to kind of come into another country. Absolutely not.
What about
right? No. By the way, there are camps down there in Syria. There's camps down there in Geneva. There's camps down there in Syria. There's been all types of opportunities to try to solve that in Syria.
Surrounding countries, can't Europe with all its wealth welcome a few of these refugees?
Not a few. You took 2 million into Germany. And by the way, the people, you sit there and say, can't they? This is once again why you're the propaganda department of the globalist. The people in Hungary what do you think about the people of Hungary's decision? Didn't they make a decision and told you categorically they don't want that? Do you not live by the fact that two-thirds of the people in Hungary, they had, Soros was here and they had a full vetting of all these issues, okay? And two-thirds, this is not close, this is a landslide. No.
When you control the media and you constantly scapegoats, it's also easy to put that message across, right?
By the way, there's free and open media here in Hungary. You got the internet, you got Euronews, you got BBC. You don't have the Financial Times. What planet are you living in? They don't have the Financial Times. They don't have the Economist. All the issues here are fully debated. Are you sitting there today as Euronews, and you're saying they didn't have a full and frank debate on what the issues were? Are you saying that the people in Hungary are so stupid that they couldn't? You sure you are? You just said that.
I never said that.
Or do you agree that?
I saw the billboards that the government was promoting against the refugees. So.
But hang on. Do you agree that the people in Hungary and in Italy had a full and complete vetting of the issues before they voted? Yes or no?
I don't know.
Okay, then Euronews doesn't know. The answer is yes. They had a full. The answer is they had a. The answer is they had a full and frank.
I can't speak for the entire Hungarian population and the entire.
2/3. What the globalists, what the propaganda department, the opposition party media, okay. What you're not prepared to accept. What you're not prepared to accept is when people vote against what you want.
Every question I ask you, you accuse me of being propaganda. I'm just asking questions,
no, you're
so
not.
I'm trying to understand.
No, you're not. You're coming with an angle that this is aren't these terms bad? Isn't this hate rhetoric? Isn't this racist?
Right, but what, you want me to come here and just promote what you have to say? No, this is not.
No, I didn't say you had to. I didn't say you had to. No, when you're in the opposition party media.
So
I love these. Absolutely, the opposition party media. Absolutely, it's just like MSNBC back in the United States. Right. That's one of the reasons. By the way, one of the reasons that the opposition political parties are so weak and don't really have the muscle mass to take on the populist nationalist movement. You're seeing this in the United States. The Democratic Party really does have a response. They have leaned so heavily on your parent company, MSNBC or NBC. They've leaned so heavily on CNN. They've leaned so heavily on the opposition party media. When I said that in the White House, I just didn't make that up as some cute term. The opposition party to Donald Trump is not the Democratic Party. The opposition party to Donald Trump is the media.
You made that very clear in the past several times. We talked about Germany and Angela Merkel. You never hid in how much you dislike Angela Merkel. Yes, she remains popular in Germany. She was re-elected for a 4th term. She presided over a period of wealth and prosperity in Germany. So what is your problem with Angela Merkel?
My problem with Angela Merkel was, as an American, is that Germany's not pulling their weight because of Angela Merkel.
What do you mean?
Well, in NATO. I mean, they're supposed to be an ally. Okay, they're supposed to meet a minimum commitment of 2%. Okay, of their budget
Wait, NATO is the only reason you dislike her so much?
Well, no, there's other.
Okay.
The principal reason, as an American, when they came to the White House, and I spent time with the National Security Advisor.
She's not the only one, by the way. They're not, according to Mr. Trump, giving enough money to NATO, contributing enough to NATO. So let me ask you, the main points. If you have to summarize, what are your main points?
I was saying that before he cut me off. I was talking about NATO. Can I do that?
Okay.
Is that okay with you?
Go ahead.
Can we do this? Okay. So in NATO, to be an alliance, right, you have to have some kind of minimum requirement to actually fund your defense spending, right? And Germany are deadbeats, okay? As you said, they're very wealthy. They get a budget surplus, right? They're at the front line of NATO, one of the building blocks of it. And yet the 2% minimum, I don't think they've ever reached it. In fact, it's years and years and years and years. They're, I think, around 1% or 1.2%. And if you really go and look at the uses of proceeds of that 1.2%, it's not all for defense. They get global warming and all this other stuff in there too. When you really look at what the Germans actually spend on equipment and manpower and interoperability, everything would be an alliance, it's under 1% or less. And so our question was, hey, here you've allowed, okay, 2 million Syrian refugees into the country, totally irresponsibly. You have no understanding or chain of title of the paperwork of who these people are. You don't know how many are radicalized, how many are part of ISIS, how many are part of Al-Qaeda, and yet in X amount of years, they're going to be eligible for the visa waiver program to come into the United States. And what we said is that back when she first came to the White House, President Trump had gone back in an old budget because our military came to us because of NATO in the Middle East and other things like that. Right? The Middle East, by the way, that caused the Syrian refugee problem that almost destroyed Europe, where the United States is fully engaged. We had to put in $30 billion of new capital, okay, that we couldn't put into social programs, etc. And Germany's entire defense budget at that time, I think, was around $35 billion. So it's just patently unfair. And so our conversations are very straightforward.
Right.
That if Germany wants to be, if NATO's, everybody says, oh, Trump wants out of NATO. Trump, it's the last thing Trump wants to do. What President Trump has been is that he's a supporter of NATO. He came over to the opening of the NATO headquarters. He came to Warsaw. He's been to the G7 and the G20. But what he's saying is that the United States doesn't need Europe as a protectorate. They need Europe as an ally, right? A robust ally. And the first way you can prove that is start to pay the 2% and to have your armed forces work together so that you have a true military threat. And then in addition, help us out in regions like in the Middle East, right, in with Iran, which are causing these mass and are going to cause more mass migration issues that are only going to haunt Europe in the years to come.
Right, but still, she remains popular with Germans, right? So it's.
Sure. I think she's less popular today. She just had to put, as you know, she had to really scramble to put together a coalition. Mm-hmm. Her popularity is down. Her voting majorities are down. Alternative for Deutschland is on the rise, so she's much less popular today. But by the way, whatever German people decide is what German people decide. I'm not there to tell German people which way to do things.
You mentioned the AfD with its Islamophobic and xenophobic rhetoric. Do you think that a country like Germany holding these views can be dangerous?
I think it's what's right for the German people. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that Alternative for Deutschland, particularly with Alice Weidel and Beatrice Storch and the people I know, I wouldn't call it xenophobic and Islamophobic. I think they're very focused. And by the way, every time somebody talks about radical Islamic terrorism, does not mean they're Islamophobic. President Trump went to Riyadh. The Riyadh summit, we had, 54 Sunni Arab nations come together with the United States and asked for our help, and we said we're there to help you. And what was the top two things they wanted help with? The top thing they wanted help with was radical Islamic terrorism. They say they understand not just exporting, the financing of it and exporting to Europe is a problem, but it's now starting to blow back on their societies. And they asked President Trump, that's why President Trump went to Riyadh, to do that. The second thing they wanted was this expeditionary, expansionist mentality of Iran or Persia through Hezbollah. So my point is, President Trump, and they all called him as Islamophobe. They all said, "Oh my gosh, this guy is, hates Muslims." He went there, and by the way, on his Iran deal, who are the top proponents of what he's done in Iran? The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, the Saudi Arabia, and Egypt and Jordan. Mm-hmm. So last time I looked, those were all Muslim countries, right? And 100% Muslim countries, and they've been very supportive of President Trump's. They've been very supportive of President Trump trying to stop the financing of radical Islamic terrorism, and it's spread throughout Western Europe, and the United States. And so when people like AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, bring this up, it's not Islamophobic. It's trying to have an adult conversation about something that's real.
We're unfortunately running out of time.
I would love to do this all day.
Me too. But unfortunately, we have obligations.
By the way, I tell you, I love Euronews. I do. I'm glad you guys. No, because I love.
Euronews?
I'm going to start. It's an NBC affiliate, or the NBA partners.
Yeah. Let me ask you two or three more questions.
Sure.
You've spoken about a brave new world. Can you paint me a picture of where the European Union, will be in 10, 20 years from now?
Well, I think one thing, it'll be a collection of nations. One thing about the European
Union.
No. I think the European Union will still be around. I think it was going down a path of being like the United States, where these nation states kind of gave up their total nationhood and were part of some bigger organization. I think what you're seeing today, when I say brave new world, I think you're going to have, number one, with populism, I think you're going to have people with much more control of their sovereignty and their citizenship, okay? And I think in nationalism, what you're going to have is a collection of robust nations. Right, you're going to have a robust Hungary and Czech Republic and Germany and France, and so I think it's terrific. I think people are going to be down on actually have more direct control of their countries. And I would tell people, if you think globalism, because people kind of were asleep at the switch, and all these decisions were made by these elites on globalism, the decisions that mankind has coming in the next 10 or 20 years, particularly on things like the convergence of biotechnology and artificial intelligence, in advanced chip design. When you look at the convergence of that, the scientists call it the singularity, where we actually start to discuss what is human and what's not. Those decisions are coming on to mankind in the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years. At that time, if you don't have populism, if you don't have it that people have much more control of their own destinies, if we let that go to the scientific, managerial, engineering, financial elite that made the decisions on globalism and really hurt the working class throughout the world, that we're going to be in a world of hurt. So I think it's terrific.
And you've also said that European Union, the politics of Europe are 2 years ahead of the U.S.
Yes. I think not the EU. I think the populist nationalist movement here. I think like in Brexit, or when I studied what Nigel Farage was doing in the spring of 2014 in the European parliamentary elections, when I went around with the UKIP guys and kind of observed what they were doing. Many of those issues, many of that enthusiasm, you could see in the Trump campaign a couple of years later. So it's like what happened in Italy the other day. One of the things we're trying to do in the United States, in the Republican Party, in this kind of populist wing we're building, is to reach out to the Bernie Sanders people. We happen to think that there's 20 or 25% of Bernie Sanders folks that are natural allies to us. They're economic nationalists, that we could put aside our differences on the left-right spectrum like Italy. And that's why Italy is such an important thing for your audience to look at. Who know, these experiments, by the way, are all going to be in fits and starts. Nothing's going to be perfect, but what's happening in Italy and what happened in Hungary are quite important in world politics. And I think in the United States, that's one of the reasons I'm trying to study it, because I do believe as the Trump revolution continues on in the United States of America, you're going to see a melding of certain elements of the Bernie Sanders part and the working class populist nationalist part of the Trump movement.
Next question, and I have two more questions, and then because we're really running out of time. It's more of a personal question.
Sure.
Since you left the White House, left Breitbart, you're doing these speeches, you're speaking to the media that you call the opposition party.
Yes. Well, I always like engaging with the opposition party.
Are you doing this because you want to stay in the spotlight? You want to remain?
No. Actually, no. One of the things we're doing is that I've got a C4, and we're building an infrastructure to support populism in the United States, the populist nationalist movement. One thing we're doing right now is very much focused on messaging. Right, we've got a war room. We've got surrogates that go out there. We're trying to get a consistent message every day in the for the kind of the overall populism, nationalism. And so it's really, look, for 10 years. And, part of it is a Breitbart. I was doing a lot of other things when I was at Breitbart too. Government accountability, doing other things. That making movies, I'm making films again. Is that I have been working at this populist movement for 10 years. Right, I kind of came into the Trump, the Trump campaign. It's probably its low point. Right, to kind of help President Trump get focused and lead.
You're paid for the speeches that you do around Europe.
Not all of them. Some I do for free. I'm doing a speech next week in Rome for free. I do a lot of speeches.
The one you did in Hungary, was that for free or was that paid?
No, that was at the conference. So these conference speeches are paid for. Some are paid for and some are free. It just depends on.
You're not a real militant. You're doing this for the money.
Well, no, because if this money all goes back to pay for the organization. You got to raise money to pay for the organization. We have a lot of people. We're putting people on the payroll. We're trying to do messaging. So it's got if an organization can afford to pay something for it, we'll do it. If they can't afford to do it, we'll do it. So half the speeches I do are absolutely for free. So it's by the way, you're not going to get wealthy doing these kind of things. It's one of the reasons, particularly in American politics, that the populist nationalist movement never really got traction until too late, because the consultants that really do that run kind of the campaigns or run the political organizations all focus on TV advertising, where the real money is. And so this is kind of a way to build something kind of as a grassroots thing, kind of hand by mouth.
And finally, last question, I can't avoid it. It's been all over the news.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what was your role with Cambridge Analytica?
Well, Cambridge Analytica, Bob Mercer came to me, and I founded the company and helped Bob put the capital in the early days. And
did you target specific groups?
All that stuff will come out over time, but I think, here's what I say. The guy with the orange hair or the pink hair or whatever, I think, hopefully he'll eventually show. Look, he's made me look like some genius, right, as thinking up all these great thoughts. I think over time that as evidence comes out, and I'm sure he'll present evidence, because in these panels it looked like he just kind of talked, that I think people see at the end of the day it was a data mining company and a polling company. By the way, what's their hundreds of Well, I think that's his. If you look at, talk to the people in the Trump campaign and talk to Brad Parscale, who I think's been very upfront, and Jared Kushner, who ran the digital side. They said they were one contractor among a dozen, and they did a good job in what is traditionally online polling and things like that. But I don't think it's anything out of the extraordinary. The thing in Cambridge that came up that was the big deal, that I can't believe people were shocked, is that Facebook essentially makes its money. The reason Facebook is worth a couple of $100 billion, and that Zuckerberg's the richest guy in the world, is that their business model is to take your data and to monetize it and to sell it. In the United States, the Democratic Party has this, the Republican Party has it. President Obama had. By the way, President Obama had it. He had perfected it.
It was done without people's consent on a platform.
By the way, I don't think your consent. I don't think you have consent right now. If you saw, I think there's something like 2,000 apps they're looking at that nobody realized that they had their consent. Okay, you're going to see when you sign these user agreements, which people don't really understand, you're kind of giving broad consent. But by the way, that'll come out all over time. I think you'll see it's a nothing burger. But I think the important thing is going to come out of there is that control of your own personal data with Facebook and with Google, right? I believe, and I said this starting last September. Go look at my speeches in Alabama throughout the country. I've been saying for a long time that these big technology companies that are in business with government is that your personal data, okay, you ought to be able to opt in or opt out consciously and be paid for that. That personal data you ought to be paid for. I think the thing in Facebook of what you're saying, there are literally thousands of apps. And I'll tell people right now, in the United States, both the Democratic Party, the Obama campaign, the Republican Party, literally on virtually every citizen has thousands of cross-references from different of these databases that are already out there. And Cambridge, trust me, was no different than that. It's pretty standard, pretty standard data mining company.
Steve Bannon, thank you very much for
fantastic. Good luck with Euronews. I'm glad to be one of the first interviews the first week for you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.